Thank you all for being here tonight. I am excited. Any chance I get to be in front of people, one, is fun. But two, just to be able to really elevate neighborhoods, to have conversation that really lends towards producing thriving neighborhoods that we talk about within our mission. So tonight, I'm really excited to be with you, to really introduce our panelists. We have an awesome panel here tonight. Our panelists, and as I say their name, they will come up to the stage, are Derek Miller, Schmeeka Simpson, and Angel Starks. As we get ready to get going, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about each of their backgrounds. You can also find this information by scanning the QR code on the screens. So Derek Miller is the Long Range and Mobility Planning Manager with the City of Omaha's Planning Department. He's been with the department for 17 years and previously served as a city planner for the cities of Bellevue and Lincoln. Derek is currently serving a governor-appointed 5-year term on the Nebraska State Board of Landscape Architects. He holds a bachelor's degree in urban studies from the University of Nebraska at Omaha, a master's degree in community and regional planning from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and a graduate certificate in public management through the College of Public Affairs and Community Service at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Excuse me while I make my homemade fan. Schmeeka Simpson is a Lobby School Policy Fellow with the Nebraska Civic Engagement Table. She is also the Director of Tours at the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation. If you have not had a Schmeeka Simpson tour at the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation, I suggest you set it up before you leave tonight. And she is also board president of Stand In for Nebraska. She sits on the University of Nebraska at Omaha's Redlining Community Engagement Service Learning Board. The board is made up of active community members trained to identify, inform, and educate the wider community about the systemic effects of redlining. The goal of the community board is to allow the community to have a seat at the table. I will say that again. A seat at the table as a decision maker. She is also the proud mother of 3 beautiful daughters. Angel Starks is the Director of Learning, and Development at Spark CDI, and a proud native Omahan. She is a member of the Omaha Area Board of Realtors, the Nebraska Realtors Association, and the National Association of Realtors. She serves on the OABR's Diversity and Education Committees and is a member of the Women's Council of Realtors and Young Professionals Network. She enjoys working with individuals, especially first-time home buyers and sellers, and walking them through purchasing or selling their homes. Please help me welcome Derek, Schmeeka, and Angel, and thank them for being here. I'd also like to take a little moment to recognize our sponsors for From the Ground Up. Their support is instrumental in allowing One Omaha to put on impactful programming that empowers residents to develop thriving neighborhoods throughout our city. First National Bank of Omaha, Builder Trend, Metropolitan Community College, Omaha Public Power District, Metropolitan Area Planning Agency, and, no bias, the South Omaha Neighborhood Alliance. Tonight, we're going to be talking about different aspects of housing developments. So let's start by discussing the balance between building denser neighborhoods and creating home ownership opportunities. I'd like to start with you, Derek. Can you give us some background on how housing is related to the tax base for the city? How are property taxes related to schools and infrastructure?
Sure. Is this on? Can everyone hear me? Good. By the way, it's really bright up here. No place to hide. Say my house, it has a certain value, and the value of of my house is determined by the Douglas County assessor, and usually that's determined by market, what the market says it's worth. Usually the assessor will look at recent home sales and then try to put the assessed valuation of that property at or near market value. And then all the taxing entities where their property, my property, fits into, they all have mill levies or tax levies. And so there's a direct relationship between the assessed value of a property and the tax base of, say, the city, the school district, Metro Transit. And one thing that I want to make really clear that, and people really don't understand this, but most of your property tax dollars go to a school district that you're in. So about 70% go to the school district, and around 20 or so percent go to the city, and then the rest go to Metro Transit and the other NRD and others. So there is a definite nexus between the assessed valuation and the tax base or the tax base of each of those taxing entities.
Can you hear me? All right. So can you give us some background, Derek, about what the political and environmental limits to Omaha development are?
Yeah, and this is she only gave me 2 minutes. I'd like 10 or 15, but I'll do 2. So a lot of people don't know this, but the city of Omaha, we're constrained by county boundaries. So basically Washington County to the north, Sarpy County to the south, and then of course the Missouri River on the east. And then on the west, there's the Elkhorn River. And basically at the Elkhorn River, west of West Omaha, west of Elkhorn, that's basically where everything drops off into a floodplain or floodway. So everyone always thinks that when is Omaha going to grow to Lincoln? That's never going to happen because we can't cross county lines, and we also can't go west of the Elkhorn River, or what we call within the department the ridge line. So in about 25 to 30 years, we'll be done growing as we know it as far as suburban growth. So the more people know this, the better, because we're going to have to find different ways of growth for the city of Omaha if we want to continue to grow. And our growth is we're set up well to continue to grow. But one thing that will hold us back are those boundaries I just mentioned. So looking into the future, we're going to start to see more density. We have to see more density. We're going to have to see more infill development. The last 10 or 15 years, we saw a lot of infill development. As planners, we get really excited about that because we get back to where we used to be more dense. The city of Omaha used to be about 6,000 people per square mile. That's about the density of Boston. Now we're about half that. So we basically spread out, and our population continues to grow. But if we want to grow much past 2050, we're going to have to start to grow up in a lot of areas. And you see it just around here as you walk around Benson. There's a lot of density that's added. So if you take anything away from me tonight, we're going to have to start to densify if we want to continue to grow as a community.
Can you expand a little bit more on the type of housing that needs to be developed to really meet the needs that the city has?
Yeah, I mean, you see the big apartment complexes, which are nice. There's just one right back out here that was recently built and another one right over here, but we're going to have to see more what's called missing middle. So if you look at Dundee, there are duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, some non-conforming accessory dwelling units. That's the type of development that we need to see, and that's the type of changes we're trying to make within our comp plan or zoning code to allow more of. We have to see it's missing middle housing, but it's also called gentle density. So you're not disrupted by this huge 500 dwelling unit apartment complex. So that's really what we want to focus on in the future, is that smaller density.
Thank you. So one thing that we don't want to do is or lose in this conversation is the role housing plays in building family wealth, and how that has contributed to upward mobility in this country. So that being said, Schmeeka, can you give us some background on how housing is related to generational wealth?
Absolutely. Most of us know that the key to prosperity and success here in the United States is to be able to own land. That is how you are able not only to build generational wealth, but that allows you to be able to pass down, which is what generational wealth is, right? Pass down wealth to your children and your children's children. And so therefore, after Reconstruction, this was in the 1800s, after Reconstruction, Black people in particular, after slavery, were promised 40 acres and a mule, right? And that was land. So that meant we would have been able to have a stake in this country and have some land that we could pass down to our children to generate that generational wealth. But unfortunately, instead of giving black people 40 acres and a mule, they turned around and gave those reparations to the slave owners. And so those previous slave owners were able to not only keep hold of the land, but hold of power and success in this country. There was also a group here in Omaha called the Omaha Claim Club. The Omaha Claim Club was specifically established to determine who would be able to take and keep land here in Omaha, Nebraska. The only people who were allowed to participate in the Omaha Claim Club and to hold that land were typically white males. And so that's why you will see that generational wealth and the wealth gap between whites and blacks exist, because we as black and brown people were denied, and that kind of goes into the next question, but were denied the opportunity to hold land, and not just through the Omaha Claim Club, through the GI Bill that was supposed to allow black soldiers that came back from the war. They were denied those mortgages and those home loans. Black and brown people were forced into redline communities. And so those communities didn't have land for sale. You could barely get a mortgage. You had to become a renter if you were even allowed to live in those areas. Sundown towns and other exclusionary zoning practices stopped black and brown people from living in certain spaces. So therefore, if you couldn't live in a space, you therefore couldn't own land in a space. And now we see these generational wealth gaps between the black community and the white community simply because we have not had the same opportunities in owning and passing on land to our children and our children's children.
Thank you. Any other follow-up to that? Okay. So let's talk about some options to increase density for political and environmental reasons, while also continuing to provide home ownership opportunities to residents. So Angel, what are some options and trends in new development to increase density and provide home ownership opportunities?
Well, it's interesting because I actually wear two hats, and sometimes they vary on priority. One side, as a person that helps people buy and sell homes, I get to see the humanistic features and desires of individuals that want to be able to own something and continue that generational wealth. On the other side, I also get the opportunity to see the real estate development side of things, which tends to focus right now on infill development and the need for missing middle. But also understanding that we have to meet people where they are. So some of the trends that we are seeing is a big influx of down payment assistance programs for first-time home buyers, which are limited to a certain income bracket of 80% area median income or below, which then provide them with upward $50,000 for down payment assistance. So someone could buy a $250,000 house at a $200,000 loan price. But also that isn't considering what that silent second will look like, which we can go in more into. But also, I think there has been some great developments on what accessory dwelling units, ADUs, could be utilized in the future, and how they can help individuals provide more affordable housing for individuals. There's also the idea of appraisal gap financing, for special financing for individuals that want to develop in disinvested areas, because right now for new construction of a home, it could cost, for a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home, could cost upward $350,000. And if we're trying to make that synonymous with affordable, we are out of control. So they have to be able to provide some type of appraisal gap funding or forgivable loan from the developer side of things in order for people to want to develop in disinvested areas and infill lots, because it tends to be much more expensive than having a cornfield and developing that for 80 units or 80 single-family homes versus a one-off vacant lot that you see in North or South Omaha with infrastructure in the ground and other types of issues that may come with the development of such. So we have to be very cognizant in understanding that policy plays a huge role. We have to have funding sources that will comply and encourage and incentivize good investment and development in our areas, but also understanding the person that's going to own or live in that space needs to also have the amenities that we would anywhere and not slight them for their quality of life.
Maybe that's a conversation we'll have to continue as we talk about policy and One Omaha really thinks about its space and advocacy. Derek, we heard a little bit of talk about building units. But what are some options outside of building new units to increase density?
Yeah, so some of the other options that's not typical from what we've built over the last 50 years, and actually we have one developer, a couple developers that are working in a space of converting old office buildings and old power plants and a hospital, which I wouldn't want to live in an old hospital. But so there's other ways to do it other than building, your typical multifamily or single family. So those have worked really well. Typically with those buildings are already there, so there's not a lot of pushback from the neighborhood. There still is some, but the building's already there, so it's not new. Another area, and we talked a lot about this during our housing action plan that we developed and approved last year. Our housing stock, especially our single-family housing stock, is getting older. The vast majority of it is really old, and it's some of it has a lot of, well, not some of it, much of it has a lot of deferred maintenance. We have programs at the city and others that have funding for rehab of single-family homes and others, but we really need to increase that to continue those, because most of those homes they're well built when they were built, and all they need is a small level of investment. So we need to make sure that we continue to rehab our older homes, and some of that's hard to do for your average homeowner. I'll say it again, maybe it'll turn into a drinking game, but ADUs, accessory dwelling units, again, a lot of those exist. Thousands of exist today. They're just non-conforming. There's nothing to be afraid of. I think we have a lot of people in Omaha that are afraid of them, but it's something that has worked across the country and can work here.
ADUs were also called mother-in-law houses.
Yeah.
Yes, I have one actually next door to my home in South Omaha. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about density in the tax base. Can density increase the tax base without increasing property taxes?
Not it. Can you state that again? I'm sorry.
Can density increase the tax base without increasing property taxes?
If it happens across the board, I think it can. The more development you have across the board that are paying into the tax base, it doesn't mean that everyone's taxes will go up. So I think the more, just the same with population. We have one of the highest property tax rates in the country in Nebraska because very few people live here. So we need to get more people to move here. And I think with more development, I think down the line, maybe there will be some uptick in property taxes, but overall, longer term, I think it'll be less for everyone. So it's shared across the community.
I think I'd like to add the fact that because there's a lot of areas that have been disinvested, when you start to reinvest, the newness comes in and then it spreads across everywhere. For instance, a new construction would be listed for $250,000 next to a house that maybe is evaluated at $180,000. And then because that house is worth $250,000, anything that is built after that looks comparable to that will also be valued at $250,000. So when you've had so much disinvestment, the shock of reinvestment into the area is felt across all the entire neighborhood. But it has to start somewhere. Otherwise, the appraisals and valuations of these homes are going down, and eventually it will stabilize. So when there's not the need for so much newness, then our property taxes will also stabilize because there's not so much shock of newness because it's just the norm when it should be the norm.
Keep that microphone, Angel. So, let's shift slightly. Let me ask you this. Can you talk about the differing expenses in some of these different approaches?
Sure. I think this question is asking specifically on guides to homeownership. Is that correct? Or is it more based on the development? I think zoning has a huge portion, plays a huge role on how we approach development. And what setbacks and how big lots are. Many of you know that the land bank has several lots for sale, right? And people think, why wouldn't they just go and buy these lots for a few tens of $1,000s and do something great with it? Well, some of it, the setbacks or the current zoning regulations just don't match any type of investment that would bring any type of return. So then you have to get creative and then work with city planning to be able to see if there's any special layovers or overlays rather that could be attributed to that lot in order for you to actually put something there that would be profitable. On the sales side and actually ownership side, there are some things that happen when you go to do a silent second, as I talked about, where you buy that house for $250,000 but only have the $200,000. That $50,000 could be what we call a silent second. It's a silent second loan that over the course of 15 years, if you own that house after 15 years, it is forgiven and it doesn't go away. You don't pay on it for the 15 years, but if you sell within the 15 years, you have to pay that portion back. The issue with that is people need to understand and have access to how to maintain their homes. Just like Derek stated, 15 years of loving on your home is one thing, but if you don't have the past education and understanding of how to maintain your home, then you are not going to be able to get the return on your investment after that time, and then you're losing out on equity. Because as you said, the only way that we're really making money is if we maintain and is able to push it on through legacy and generations, and we have to be on top of that and have that wraparound services to be able to provide and support that.
Wow. Okay, thank you for that. Schmeeka, we're going to shift to you. Let's talk about general density approaches. Can you talk about that from a neighborhood perspective, such as like how rehabbing can help keep people in their homes?
As she just spoke to the education needed and the resources needed to keep your house up to code, up to date. Rehabbing allows us to be able to keep our homes in a presentable fashion so that we can gain equity, so that we can pass that down to our children as part of generational wealth. So rehabbing is so important because a lot of people are losing their homes, as Derek said, to very simple fixes. A lot of people are losing their homes because they just don't have the education or, once again, those connections needed to be able to keep their homes in a way that allows them to make money and allows them to create equity, allows them to create and generate wealth. So rehabbing is important, particularly the elderly, in our communities need a lot of help. And there are some basic programs I know that are available, but as Derek said earlier, they're not enough. They don't have enough funding, and there's not enough outreach. A lot of people still don't know about these programs. And right now, particularly in North Omaha, gentrification is like on fire. So I know a lot of people who are being pressured out of their homes. And when you are getting phone call after phone call after phone call to sell your home, plus you have repairs that need to be done, plus you have property taxes that are rising, a lot of people are losing generational wealth more quickly than I think we've had in previous decades and generations.
Which also leaves our communities and neighborhoods feeling and looking different as well. And as we talk about how neighborhoods feel, let's talk about how we also get around in our neighborhoods. A really important aspect of affordable housing is access to transportation. Many of y'all know that I was a bus rider for years. I love talking about transportation. Let's talk about how transportation and housing are linked in Omaha, Nebraska. Schmeeka, would you explain how transportation is linked to affordable housing?
Well, overall living costs tend to be cheaper in areas with easy access to public transportation. But even if we just kind of take a look at the historical context of Omaha and transportation, even thinking about the North Freeway, right? The North Freeway was originally designed to bypass North Omaha. We weren't even supposed to be part of that transportation cycle. Even now, the bus does not run to specific parts of North Omaha. I know for certain to get your driver's license, you got to go either to Bellevue or you got to go to 168th and Maple. And the bus doesn't even go out that way that very often. I think it's twice a day. And so an Uber out to 168th and Maple, I know because I was in that predicament, is $50 one way. That is just unconscionable for people in communities who don't have those kind of resources, obviously because they don't have cars. Unfortunately, the people without reliable transportation tend to live in communities that are dealing with lack of resources. So North and South Omaha are going to be the ones without cars. And then we're also the ones that rely on public transportation the most. We are also the ones who seem to be disenfranchised when that transportation does not lead or go to economic hubs where the jobs are. And that's also a symptom of redlining. That's an old symptom. Back in the day, we used to have to carpool to get back and forth to our jobs because there wasn't transportation to take us where we needed to go. And so unfortunately, we kind of see redlining and its effects just play itself out over and over in different ways. And it's good that we're here having these conversations so we can kind of alleviate those injustices.
Okay, thank you. Derek, let's shift to you. Let's talk a little bit more about public transportation in Omaha. How is it funded?
So maybe I'll answer two questions at once. There's another one on here. So the bus system, transit in Omaha, is provided by Metro Transit, and they're separate from the city, although most people in Omaha think that they're a city department. They're not. They are funded from various funding sources, but they're the top three. So fares pay anywhere from 10 to 15%, which when people hear that, they're kind of shocked that the fares don't pay more to operate that system. No, it's sometimes as low as 9% the fares pay for. The next one up is federal funding, so they get about 35% from the federal government through FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, and then most of their funding, half of their funding, comes from their mill levy or property tax. So they are funded, basically they have the same footprint as the city of Omaha, so every time we grow, their footprint grows bigger. So the same footprint as the city, so they get about 50% of their funding from property taxes.
Okay. And then, so where does, this is a funny question, where does revenue from the parking meters go?
Yeah, when I first started the city, I tried to find that out. I was like, where does this all go? I mean, I pay all this money, where does it go? About 2010, that system changed, and they created what is called an enterprise system. So the money that you feed in the meter, if you still do that, besides if you don't use the app, it goes into this enterprise parking fund. So that fund is responsible for not only for the on-street parking, it also funds the parking garages you see in downtown. And that system's growing a little bit bigger. I think we're starting to acquire more garages west of downtown. So all that funding is all commingled. But that funding, if they bring in like $10 million in parking from on-street parking, that doesn't go to the general fund. In the city, we always joke that, you know, if we somehow produce more resources, more funding resources, it just goes in the general fund. Well, that doesn't happen here. It all stays within to manage parking.
Okay, so let's talk about the streetcar. Who will be responsible for that, and how will that be funded?
So the streetcar itself, it's managed by the Omaha Streetcar Authority, and the Omaha Streetcar Authority was created through an interlocal agreement between the city of Omaha and Metro Transit, because the city, we can't operate a transit system in the state of Nebraska. Only the transit operator can. So on the construction side of the funding, how we're paying for construction is through what's called value capture. So if you visualize when we built the Dodge Street Expressway for $120 million, I think it was 12 years ago, You see, now you drive out West Dodge, you go to the DMV on 168th, way out there on West Dodge. You see all that property along that corridor start to become more valuable, and you see more businesses pop up. And a lot of that's a direct result of West Dodge, improvements to West Dodge and the West Dodge Expressway. The same thing is happening here. So with the improvement of transit through streetcar, when those investments are being made, it'll basically increase the value of the property along the streetcar route within 3 blocks. So through what we utilize as tax increment financing, or TIF, we're using TIF to fund the streetcar construction. It's very complicated. There's another hour-long presentation we can give to go through all that. And then as far as operating, the operating funds will actually come from the parking revenue fund. So parking is actually paying to operate the streetcar, and the streetcar is going to be free when it operates in 2027.
Okay. How will the streetcar be different from the bus system?
It's just a different, what I call it's just a different transit tool. So we have local bus, which we see all throughout Omaha. We have express bus that runs in morning and evening. We have the orbit route that started operating on Dodge Street during the pandemic. And then you have streetcars, just a different transit tool.
Okay. Angel, we were talking a little bit about parking. Can you give us some background on how creating parking spaces in new developments increases the prices of those developments and the units within them?
Parking is such a fun topic.
Yes.
You don't know that it's fun until you have to build something. Because there's so many regulations on how many parking spots are allotted for every different type of building, depending on the capacity. And I think it's 1.5 spots for one single family home, whether you own a car or not, which is kind of fun, because it's future planning and to make sure that it's conducive, that we're not having an overhaul of cars on the street. But one of the interesting parts of that is also goes back to the topic of zoning. Depending on what the zoning is for the area, they can have waivers and or different criteria and don't require any type of parking. And if you're anything like me, I love having a parking spot. I will only, for the most part, Uber downtown because I hate having to find parking, right? So there is value in doing that, but also because it takes up space on a parcel or a lot, you have to either get smaller properties or the lot has to be big enough for whatever you would like to create in that spot or in that space. And also, there's requirements for how much green space is required and different things such as that. So understanding the code, the zoning code for what you're attempting to do is really important because I'm a person who likes rules, so I would be somebody that reads the code, the municipal code book, you know, the guidebook. But it comes down to safety for individuals and having enough space for what could be and there. But it does increase the budget for whatever construction is there because you are also responsible for any infrastructure that happens on that lot. So if there's an unfinished alley or if you have to put in a stoplight or sidewalks or anything that contributes to that improvement, even though it will belong to the city, you are still responsible financially for installing those things on behalf of the city. So it can drive up prices, especially if you're looking for development. You want to be cognizant of those things. And if you're a homeowner, you have to also understand if you decide to change anything and make improvements on that lot, that if the code changes or if you don't have access to those waivers and so forth, that you will also have to pay for whatever comes with that improvement plan.
Awesome. We are going to shift a little bit. So, funny story, the last panel we had, one of our panelists was the infamous Preston Love. So if you know Preston, you know sometimes you have to take the mic. And so this time I forewarned the panelists. I said, okay, we have a 2-minute limit on questions, and we are right on time, if not ahead. So these last few questions, please do not feel confined to my time limit that I gave you, because none of you are Preston, and Preston, when you see this, I love you. So anyone can answer this question. All of you can answer these questions, actually. Let's say that we have some new development. developments, and let's say that we wanted to decrease parking within these new developments. In your opinion, what can the city do to increase transportation options in the short term?
Well, I'll start, and you could add. Something I've been working on since 2006 is other modes of transportation. We need to start investing more for active transportation. We need to invest more in pedestrian, bicycling infrastructure, and transit. All three of those areas have been underfunded since the beginning of time in Omaha. And really, well, not beginning of time, I would say the 1940s, 1950s, when we went away from the streetcar system. It was really a pedestrian-focused community. And we need to get back to that. We need to get back to creating great places for people to be where they want to be and not so much be in a car. Going forward, we'll still see a lot of people, the vast majority of people driving automobiles, but we need to start, we need to continue to fund active transportation. I think that's one of the first things we need to do. We have funded somewhat, but we need to increase that funding.
Would you have?
I feel that if we are looking for individuals to live a fast-paced life, then I need fast-paced transportation. And usually that means I'm car dependent. And even though a lot of our urban settings have different variations of transportation, like your B-cycles and your whatever those little things are, the Lime scooters, those types of things, or you can walk. I think there's a need for better safety and education across the board on how to treat non-car transportation. But also, I am a person that feels that Greater Omaha was meant for me and not just urban Omaha, right? So I want to be able to get to a La Vista, or I want to get to Elkhorn, or I want to get to 144th and Maple without it taking 3.5 hours to do so. I want options to explore what I am supposed to call my home, and every bit of Omaha and Greater Omaha is supposed to be my home. So if I have to be dependent on a car to experience all of that, then that's what's going to happen until somebody makes another option for me to be able to see otherwise. I absolutely enjoy those B-cycles. They are so fun, right? And they little boost you up to a little hill, and it makes you feel all healthy and great, right? But then also understanding I'm very limited on when I have to return that. And how safe do I feel on the streets that we are traveling with cars, and how interesting it is when I've traveled to different countries, how very pedestrian focused, very cycle focused they are, and that cars are very much secondary to the pedestrian lanes or the bicycle lanes, right? And I think we have to have a community shift and what that looks like in order for everybody to be on board, because we don't want to put people in harm for what is right and not have wide enough sidewalks, not have designated bike lanes, not have great wayfinding and signage and trails and so forth. So we really have to be very intentional and to think not as the person that has it all, but also as the person that should have access to whatever they desire and to explore as much as this city as they so desire. And I think that you have to think outside of just being east of 72nd Street in order to do that.
I would also like to talk about stigma that's attached to public transportation. I was talking to my neighbor, and he is on an aggressive weight loss regimen, and part of that is him walking. And he said he was trying to talk to a girl, and the girl was not interested in him because he was walking. And so we kind of just had this conversation about how much stigma is attached to walking. And how crazy that is, because that's what your legs and your feet are made for, right? And then, once again, you kind of brought up what I was going to say about how other cultures are so pedestrian-focused that we have just invested so much into vehicles, and it's gone to so many levels where, fossil fuels and climate change and all of these things are part of this conversation of transportation and how it impacts our life on a daily basis. So really looking forward to changing the stigmas around taking the bus here in Nebraska. You can go to California, it's not a big deal to take a train. You can go to New York, it's not a big deal to take a subway. But taking the bus here in Omaha, you feel like you're broke, or you don't have access, and it shouldn't feel like that. And then also when we're talking about transportation options, I think a lot of times once again, handicap and the elderly get left out of the conversation. It's hard for the elderly to get on a B-cycle or a Lime scooter, So really kind of looking to see what kind of options are available for everyone to be able to explore their space is something that I'm encouraging all of us to be able to do.
Thank you. Going to shift a little bit to one of my favorite topics. There's a lot of redevelopment happening in Omaha, Nebraska, especially in the urban core. And as the city begins really going through this redevelopment, what policies or programs can combat the displacement of people living in these rapidly redeveloping neighborhoods? Any of you feel free to take a stab at that. Policies and programs to help prevent people from being displaced as these neighborhoods are being redeveloped.
I'm a huge supporter of community engagement, and the idea of people not doing for someone but with individuals. And I think that includes being very intentional about income and affordable units or so forth being included in what is required. I dislike when we have to tear down a beautiful building that hosts 3-4 units that are affordable for individuals, but we build an 18 to 20 plex at thousands of dollars. And those individuals are no longer a part of the community that they've been in for years. But why not require or incentivize 4, 5, 6 of those units to be for low income, moderate workforce housing? And we're a capitalistic world, country at least, right? And it's important that we think about how developers and who the developers are. That's why I appreciate the Spark Developer Academy, is because it's attempting to educate individuals that are within the community, that have a heart for the community, that actually want to do for their community without necessarily thinking it's just a money grab. And we have to make those connections to the people that are developing within communities because, yes, the money has to make sense, absolutely, because otherwise you will be not able to continue because you've made a development that just isn't cost effective and isn't sustainable. But those individuals also see those individuals that they are serving as family members. They see them as people they grew up with. They know their stories and they know the legacy of the parents and the grandparents and aunts and uncles because they are within the community. It's when we have outside people that don't have any type of relationship or any consideration about the people that are being displaced, they come in and take over. And so we have to protect that, be it policy, be it community engagement, empowerment, knowing the words and the language to be able to fight back through education, whatever the case, whatever that looks like, that has to happen.
I feel like that was a really long sentence to talk about gentrification. That's what I think we should have just said, because the combat displacement of the people currently living in neighborhoods that are rapidly redeveloping is active gentrification that's happening right now in our communities. And as you said, to piggyback, if someone else is building your community, it's not your community. And so, therefore, investing in the community is how you stop people from being displaced. Making sure, and we kind of talked about this yesterday at our redlining board meeting, a great policy we're kind of thinking about is how do we demand some kind of community give back for those that are developing new businesses and new entrepreneurial type of things. How do we have some kind of a stake that says, if you come into this community, you're going to have to invest in this community and not just in your own pockets. And once again, that community buy-in, that community intra and interpersonal relationships are going to be the most important because, you know, developers are looking at dollar signs. We're looking at gentrification. We're looking at redistricting. We are looking at people's homes and people's lives and people's communities being demolished. And we have to get more humane in this conversation when we talk about that.
Did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay. So as we're talking about these different policy ideas, right? Well, what funding options are out there to support these types of policy ideas? You know, where are the gaps?
I think one of the biggest gaps right now, and we talked all about this last year, and actually you and I talked about it earlier today, is just the funding. There's a lack of funding. What other communities have done is they've created housing trust funds, and some communities are actually putting that to a vote of the people. Kansas City, Denver, Miami, all through a ballot initiative, then through bonds, they've created housing trust funds, and it's actually one recommendation in our housing action plan that's something that needs to be created. I think that's down the road a little bit, but I think it's something that we as a community and now the business community are understanding that housing is an issue. We have businesses building housing for their employees, which I'm a little divided on that
Scary.
idea. Yeah, very scary. So lose your job, you lose your house, I guess. And so that's probably not the best way. But I think instead of building housing for your employees is to support a fund to support housing. And it could be for new housing. It could be for rehab that we talked about earlier. But it's just there's a gap in funding.
And that housing for employees is not a new thing. I mean, back to migrant workers, right, where they used to bus people hundreds and hundreds of miles and set them up in shanties and shacks so they could work their plantations and their factories. Unfortunately, we have such a capitalistic view of housing and the way that it's connected economically to business. Once again, just takes the humanity out of it. I don't have any options for funding. I mean, I feel like we've been asking that question for a very long time, particularly in the North Omaha community and redline communities. We've been crying for decades on how can we get better housing? How can we not be in these towers and, you know, all of these things. So, you know, I feel that there are lots of imaginative ways that we could fund things. We kind of talked about gambling, how casino revenues could help support housing, how the legalization of marijuana could help support a lot of different measures. I mean, if people really cared, you know, we wouldn't spend $200 million to build a new stadium. You know, I just feel like we kind of have these redundant conversations because the people who have all the money have no intention of giving it up.
Don't make me cry. Oh, gosh. So, as a realtor, I have learned over the last decade how grateful people are when they are able to buy their houses, especially a first house. Or maybe they are upgrading into a bigger house and they're using the equity from the first house and move on and on and on. I also have seen and had the opportunity to work with a lot of nonprofits that are making great waves in providing affordable housing options. But when we rely on nonprofits to do the work, then it constantly is seen as a gift and not something that we have to work for as an investment. Because then have to dot all of my I's and cross all of my T's to be eligible for a home, when owning a home should be something that I am deserving of and that I work towards, and not necessarily because I've earned it from someone being able to just give it to me, or because I'm in an income that qualifies me for someone to give it to me, because that's not what happens, right? That we get this mindset, this scarcity mindset, that we can't do for our communities like we should on our own. And even some of the funding that is out there relies on nonprofit partnership, because there's a protection that's saying nonprofits are going to be the door that looks into the hearts and souls of the people that need affordable housing and those methods. But we also have to instill and have the opportunity for people to make those investments from their own know-how, understanding, and education in order to actually have investment in their own communities, no matter what that looks like. I could go build a house somewhere right now, but for me to build a house where I want to right now is going to cost me double the amount just because of the location that I so choose. That's not cool, right? So we need to have funding that fixes the appraisal gaps, because houses are not necessarily appraising for what they were cost to build. So appraisal gaps. We also need opportunity to reset what the income variations might be in order for us to be able to have anyone that wants home ownership not have to be slighted by the amenities of a house because they are desiring to own homes. But construction costs money, right? We also need opportunities for construction and for emerging developers that might not have the greatest portfolio, but also have the opportunity to prove themselves with lower interest rates and terms that are not going to break the bank, possibly forgiveness for pre-development, because we have to investigate before we know if something's going to be viable. This has to happen at the city level, has to happen at the state level. Shoot, it can happen from the federal level. It just has to be done in a way that people feel empowered and not feel like every single time that there's money out there that it's a money grab and everybody is trying to go after all the same millions of dollars and then get nothing.
Because that contributes to that whole stigma.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Of, you're poor, you don't want to work for it, so now you have someone to save you. Mm-hmm. We don't need saviors. We need contributors. We need collaborators. We need people who stand by us and work with us. Don't give me anything. I don't need to be given anything. What I need is someone who believes enough in the cause of what they're doing and enough in me that we can move forward together. That's what true allyship is. Mm-hmm. And even leadership, the definition of being a leader is someone who can take you by the hand and move you forward. Don't leave me where I'm sitting. And I don't need a nonprofit to save me. And every time I get on this stage, I'm blasting nonprofits.
Well,
wait. One Omaha is a nonprofit.
and I love One Omaha, and I love what our but particularly the North Omaha community has more nonprofits than we do for-profit entities, and that is, as a friend told me, nonprofits means no money. You cannot pass a nonprofit down to your children. That is not generational wealth. And most nonprofits are not trying to work themselves out of a job. We have more houses than we do homeless people across the United States. So do we actually have a problem with houselessness? I don't think so. I think we have a problem with greed and capitalism, and those are going to be the foundation of what we need to fix if we're going to fix this.
And speaking to that, Angel and I just talked about this earlier, is just Airbnb and VRBO, and they cause a scarcity issue where you have so many houses and other units that are only serving someone for a weekend or a weekend here or there. It could be a home for a very long time for a family. And then and I don't know how to address this one, I've been looking all over, but just the corporate groups that have come into communities that have been in Omaha for a little while now, buying up single-family homes and displacing people. Something that has to be done around that as well.
And for the record, all my nonprofit housing developers are doing great work, amazing work, but they can't do it alone. We have to be able to invest in our communities with actual capital and equity as well.
Right. I will add to that before we open up the floor that Omaha does have a lot of nonprofits. I tell people, and I've had this conversation with Mika, and that is, I learned through travel and from presenting in other places that is because oftentimes there are gaps, right? And so we have people who decide that they want to step in to fill that gap. And that is the reason why we do have a lot of nonprofits, and we do have some great ones. And full brag, because I know that One Omaha is freaking awesome. So we are going to open up the floor for questions. If you look towards the stage, you will see 2 microphones to my right and to my left. Please feel free to approach the microphone. If you are not able, please raise your hand, and we will make sure that a microphone is brought to you. But we would like to open up the floor for questions from our awesome panelists. Please do not be afraid to ask. I'm the queen of asking questions, but I don't want to be the one to do that right now because I just asked a bunch of them. But yeah, the floor is open for questions, so please feel free to come up.
All right, I have a question, I suppose maybe kind of focused towards Derek just from the planning perspective, but speaking to Schmeeka's comment about community give back, is it possible to get a social impact study requirement for all new development where it's kind of like an environmental impact study, where there's some kind of threshold of negative impact that immediately disqualifies a project, and where any project getting taxpayer support is required to offer community-specific solutions? So, like, example would be inclusionary zoning or below-market units for any project receiving TIF. Like, how do we get that to happen? Like, what are the steps that the public needs to do?
Well,
And I just want to add, we have 30 minutes, so take your time answering questions.
So I get more than 2 minutes?
Yes. You have more than 2 minutes, Derek.
It's not a mystery in Omaha. Developers, the development community have a lot of sway. So I think it's conversations like these that'll help with something that you're talking about. MAPA had recently, and this is something similar, but MAPA recently made available an equitable development scorecard. So it's a fantastic tool to apply to any new development, and it has a scoring system, and then you basically get a final score at the end of the day. So it's something that exists today. I think it's something similar to what you're talking about, but I think it's community conversations, and we're going to have a lot of community conversations next year about the future of Omaha as we're going to update our almost 30-year-old comprehensive plan, formerly called a master plan, intentionally calling it a comprehensive plan. We'll have a lot of engagement. So those types of ideas, the more people bring those ideas up, and the more often they bring it up, where we basically give the power back to the community to decide the community that you want in the next 20, 30, 40 years. I think that's the time and place for that. But I like that idea. And there's other cities we've looked at that have gone through processes that we've basically said that's a great idea in Memphis and Minneapolis and other places where they have talked about those things. So it's not going to be easy, but it's something that we definitely need to do.
Good question. We have another question over here, and then we'll go over there.
Okay, you all were you mentioned about rehabbing and that there were programs. What are the programs that people who live in older homes can actually have access to them, and are the grants income driven?
They are. I'm not on that side of the department, but it's something. If you want to connect with me later after this, I could give you my card, and we could put you in connection or in contact with someone in community development. But yeah, there are programs, and like I said earlier, they are completely underfunded. But yeah, they are tied to income levels.
And then I also believe Habitat for Humanity runs a repair program, which you're able to apply for. Of course, they probably don't have enough funding for everyone, but you should definitely try. And then there are some, to Derek's point, there are some additional resources that can constitute for that. Did you have?
I kind of just Googled some things, but the United States Department of, what was this? Of Agriculture has a single-family housing repair loans and grants. Habitat for Humanity has the home preservation. There's homeowner rehabilitation assistance programs. So like I said, there's some, but the information isn't as widely known as it needs to be, and it's definitely not enough. Not enough money, not enough anything.
Well, and this is where people use the power of their home equity loans and lines of credit, so that people that actually own homes and they're maintaining, they will refinance or get a HELOC in order to continue to upgrade their house. So leveraging the debt that you have on your property is probably one of the best tools that you have. But sometimes people are too far gone before they understand that they could have done that some time ago. So I think that comes back to financial literacy and education. But in the meanwhile, like any of the programs that we just discussed.
I'm Lynn Mills. I live in the Gifford Park area. I have two questions. My first is, and I don't know how this can be answered, but in our community, we have a lot of people coming from outside of Omaha, buying single-family dwelling homes, turning them into rental properties, and then leaving the community. I've tried to talk to some of them, invite them to community events. They are not interested. How do you engage someone like that who is not from the community, who lives outside of the city limits, and is just coming in, looking at the property, checking on it once or twice a year? You have no contact information because they don't want to give it to you, and they have no interest in having ties to the community.
If it's a rental, you can go on any rental property in Omaha, which this is a very contested issue with a lot of people, but we have a rental registry, so they are required to be registered, so you can get their information off the rental registry.
Right, and I have done that, and I've called them personally.
Yeah, so I think one company's Vinebrook that's been in Omaha doing the same thing you're talking about doing, but I don't have a good suggestion. I don't know if others do, but it is a major issue, and it's something that we have to deal with.
Yes.
In other communities, nonprofits have stood up and bought the houses prior to going to these corporate landlords, but unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you.
Yeah, okay. My last question is, what do you consider affordable housing?
I think the state of Nebraska, I think the
Right,
unicameral,
there's a
they're doing
whole
a study.
interim study.
And a
Yeah,
whole
doing
study,
a whole
right.
interim study, and it'll come back and won't really tell us what we need to know, because affordable is different depending on who you talk to and what income levels they have.
Yes.
What I would say around that is that everyone deserves housing no matter what level of income they have, and we need to basically produce enough units in different types of units at different price points for everyone to have a home.
Yeah. My last comment about that affordable housing is I've been with a group. We do an outreach kind of thing, and we've been to apartments where we've had to help people evacuate because the city is closing it within 2 days.
Are you with OTU?
No,
Okay.
Omaha Autonomous Action, or OAA.
Cool.
And so one apartment building, it was condemned. The people living in it did not know it was condemned. We talked to a few tenants who paid up to $1,200 for a one-bedroom, rodent-infested, unsecure building where I met another family who was raising children and had to walk their children past homeless people trying to seek shelter from a storm, people using drugs. How does that change? It's shocking to me that the city of Omaha allows this to happen, and landlords basically get a slap on the hand. So, thank you. That's all I have to say.
And all the way back to Yates and others, it's very concerning for how that all comes down. I don't know all what goes along with that. I know there are some legal barriers that have to change to not allow that to happen, but we shouldn't force people out of their homes with 24-hour, 48-hour notice, and then go back to nonprofits and say, hey, can you help us relocate these people? So I agree with you, and it's something that does need to change.
Back to your original question, or one of your earlier questions, the formal definition of affordable is 30% of your income goes towards housing. But also, affordable isn't affordable unless you can afford it, right? So I think that also goes back to financial literacy and people understanding how much they should be affording, and not necessarily getting caught in the systemic issues of not wanting to make more because they will be responsible for more. That's a nice way of saying people are much more comfortable receiving assistance or staying on welfare, because if they make too much, then the lack of those resources make them not be able to have a quality of life that they desire. So we have issues with money. Money is an issue. So we have to make sure that we are meeting people where they are and then educating them to do better. But I think we also have to rely heavily on community and empowering individuals. We need people to understand that the condition of their homes and their, what we call in real estate, the bundle of rights, that those rights are fully enforceable, and that people cannot be intimidated or held hostage in conditions that are unfitting for them because they're afraid that they're going to be displaced. And they have to be able to know that they should speak up because they have rights. And if education of those tenant rights is something that people have to take hold and know and repeatedly know, or whatever the case may be, for them to stay, for them to be able to speak up and not be penalized because they are advocating for their own rights. We have to ensure that people understand what they can do.
Absolutely.
Literally, if you don't stand up for yourself, no one is going to stand up for you. And that, I have been in places where I've gotten kicked out because I've complained. I've been in places where we were evicted because the heat wasn't up to code, and bed bugs and roaches and everything under the sun, mold, everything, right? And I realized that the landlord didn't give two shits about me and my kids, whether we had roaches or not. The city didn't care whether we had roaches or not. The county didn't care, and the state didn't care. I had to care. And so therefore, I had to organize on behalf of my community. Omaha Tenants United, that's why I brought up OTU, we're a big help in helping, because a bunch of us got kicked out. We're helping us get moving trucks, helping us raise awareness. Even just collecting data about these places is important, because at the end of the day, I realized that I'm the only one that's going to care about this. Like, no one else is going to help me if I don't help myself. And so that education piece is huge. And then not being terrorized and not being scared, because we're all scared we're going to lose the trash that we have been given, right? And, we have to demand more. And until we demand more, they're going to keep giving us trash.
Okay. So we have time for 3 quick questions. We have 2 over here, then 1 over here.
Yeah, hi. I was curious earlier on when you were talking about infill development and some of those pieces, and I know that zoning plays a big role in what you can and can't build, and I was wondering if you all feel like Omaha's current zoning is set up to allow for that. Is that going to be an issue that developers or the city is going to run into as they want to build up in the city? Yeah.
So Omaha's zoning code it's actually older than our comp plan. It was adopted in '87, and the type of development that was occurring in 1987 was a lot of what you see west of 120th. So really that's what our zoning code is set up to do, is to create suburban development. And we've made some changes over time, made some additions, more other tools, but there's still a lot of red tape that it's not producing the right development that we need today. So how do we change it? And it's unfortunate, it's a long process. I'm a bureaucrat, so it's got to take a long time to do. But what you have to do first is update the comp plan, because the comp plan is the guiding document, it's the foundation of what we do with the built environment in the city of Omaha. And then once we have that complete, then we'll start on a new update that'll basically reflect and implement that comp plan. So we're making small changes right now. One small change that will occur in the next couple months is to make accessory dwelling units by right in certain zoning districts. That'll happen in the next few months. So we're making little tweaks, but the major change will probably occur in 2025, 2026. So it's a little ways out, but really the comp plan is what the community wants for their for the future of our city. So we can't have a zoning rewrite until we know what that future vision is.
And when there are community meetings, show up.
Yes.
And say it and talk about your experience. Humanize the bureaucracy. That's the only way that people are going to see differently.
Question over here, then over here.
Yeah, hey, my name's Seth. I am with Omaha Tenants United. If you don't like landlords, hit us up. Anyway,
was there and he helped us. Thank you, Seth. Thank you.
Of course. My question was, earlier y'all mentioned that one of the biggest problems with developing equitable housing is that communities that need more investment are more costly to do so and thus less profitable. On top of that, developers are obviously not incentivized to build affordable housing because they can't extract maximum profits. So this would seem to indicate that there's a fundamental contradiction between the needs of the people and the interests of the market. So I guess my question is, why then should we believe that the market is capable or even willing to address an issue as existential to human existence as housing? It would seem that precisely because of these contradictions that y'all have identified, we should be seeking to decommodify housing, turning it into a socialized service as opposed to a commodity. Why do we have so much faith that the market can solve the housing problem, and why should we believe it is capable of doing so when it has failed to do so for its entire existence? And just really quickly before anybody says, well, it hasn't failed, if it hadn't, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So, yeah.
I think it hasn't failed a very small portion of the population, particularly those ex-slave owners who were able to get reparations on behalf of their former slaves. And so we still see the same dynamics, the same 1, 2 to 10% that still own everything and still control everything. And we still keep having the same god dang conversations, and we've had them since the 1800s. So I am with you. I don't think that what we have is sustainable. I don't think that what we are doing is in the best interest of the common people. I think it was set up that way by the Constitution itself, and all of the policies and practices that they put in place after it. And until we get real radical about what we deserve as the people of the United States, I think we're going to continue seeing more of the same. I'm also not a big fan of asking the people who broke me to fix me, and I'm really sick of that. I'm really sick of that. So I agree 100%. I don't think that we're going to be able to fix this the way the system is set up now. It's going to take us demanding, once again, what we deserve, what we have earned, what we fight for, bleed for, pay taxes for. It's going to take us demanding that we have that. But that also takes organization. That also takes people who are ready and willing to fight for it. I mean, on one hand, I don't expect them to give them anything, but on the other hand, I know they're not going to let me take it. So it takes more of us. It's going to just take more than just me, more than just you, it's going to take us as the people, we the people, to take back what belongs to us.
I agree. I've seen how powerful real estate can be in someone's finances and or legacy. And it infuriates me how easy it comes for some individuals. How many people can go and buy a $350,000 house outright, no loan, just funds. Sometimes it makes me a little jealous that individuals have family members that gift them $10,000 to $15,000 towards a down payment. And I think that Black people specifically have been put in a situation where it's hard for them to come and compare to what that looks like. But I am not going to give up hope on the role. I think we just need to change the strategy and the mindset of individuals in order for them to go after what is meant for them. I do think there's a housing crisis all around. As she said, we've been talking about it for 40 doggone years, right? So there has to be a fix. But I think it's also going to have to happen from inside out and not outside in. Nobody else is going to change it unless we come together as a community to help ourselves. Some of the greatest things in history, Black Wall Street, all sorts of economical growth happened because the community made it happen, not because of some other system. So we have to find that and do that. And that could be co-op, that can be land trust, that can be investment trust, but people have to be able to be vulnerable enough to put something on the line and invest and to be able to continue to build what that looks like.
Absolutely. So, unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions. I apologize, but that is always really a great indicator to me of a really good conversation. Can we give our panel a round of applause, please? I had to stand up. So, one of the things I'm talking about in conversation as I continue to talk about One Omaha, the vision of One Omaha, is that when we talk about neighborhood associations, neighborhood organizing, I always say, I think people think it's some cute little sort of thing, like, oh, yeah, let's go make a community garden. Like, no. It's so much deeper than that. Janet, you know that it's so much deeper than that. I met Janet through neighborhood organizing. There are 4 things that are happening within these spaces. You experienced it tonight, actually. One of the things we're doing is we're increasing knowledge, right? We're also strengthening relationships. I don't know if you know this, but statistics prove that when you know your neighbor, crime goes down, right? So we're increasing knowledge, we're strengthening relationships, we're building capacity, and we're also creating a meaningful sense of community ownership. Those 4 things right there are precursors to systemic change. So a round of applause for participating in systemic change. Yes, round of applause. So we hope that you will join us next month. We talk a little bit tonight about land trust a little bit. You'll hear more about that as we talk about different options we have moving into the future. You will also, if you registered, receive an email from us tomorrow with a post-assessment. Please, please, please take the post-assessment so that we can really gauge how effective our programming is when we're delivering information to all of you. And most importantly, if you would like to support our mission, which is to empower people where they live, and we do that through education, training, and engagement to develop thriving neighborhoods. I don't just say words, I say what I mean. Thriving means to be able to exist, right? Even through all the bull, that word that Schmeeka said earlier. So we want to help develop thriving neighborhoods. So please go to our website, sign up for our newsletter, and donate to the cause. And when you do that, you are definitely supporting neighborhoods in Omaha, Nebraska. So final round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much for being here tonight. One Omaha appreciates you. Thank you.